Okay, hi Stephanie.
Hi,
How are you?
I am doing amazing. How are you?
I am good. So today I have Stephanie Tucker with me of Purposeful Exploration. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a topic that kind of gets lost sometimes and everybody feels it, and it's grief, which is not only just for the people that we have lost, but the things that we have lost in our lives, friendships, lives unlived, whatever that case may be. So I wanted to just introduce Stephanie to you a little bit. So she helps clients explore their needs and overcome barriers that limit their full potential. She helps clients live their best lives by working towards balance in their mind, body, and spirit connection. Stephanie and the client work together to determine what will work best for their circumstances, whether it's counseling, coaching, or energy healing. Okay, so you have so many qualifications and certifications. Is there anything specifically that you'd like to share before we get started?
Oh gosh. Well, I have qualification, master's degree in counseling psychology, master's degree in business, and many coaching certifications and advanced trainings. And our topic today is grief. And I've definitely have a lot of personal experience with grief and have a lot of education and work with many clients through grief. And I think that's the most important piece of this is the relevance to our discussion today. And I definitely have the training experience, personal and professional, for us to delve into this topic.
Okay, that is perfect. And maybe I'm going to jump back. I probably should have mentioned this. So you and I have been connected, has it been since 2020?
Yes, I think it was the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes, when we were together in a group, for the lack of better words, mastermind. I don't think we use that word anymore. What do they call them now? It was just getting us together to move our businesses forward, and we have been connected ever since. I'm not just professional, but on a personal basis. So I'm
Yes,
so thankful that you're here with me today.
absolutely.
Um, okay, so where should we start? Where should we start with grief?
Wow. Well, it's a complicated and I think misunderstood emotion, and particularly in our country. And I think the most important thing to know about grief is there's no right way to do it and no wrong way to do it, to move through it. And it's difficult, and it's not really about getting over it. It's about moving through it and recognizing that life is different after whatever it is that you've lost, whether it's a person, a job, an opportunity, a relationship, a pet, whatever it is. There's no right way to move through it. It's figuring it out and really reaching for and advocating for what you need for yourself, because often people don't know how to show up for us when we're grieving.
Right, right. It's more that they don't know what to say, right?
No,
Um,
they
I know that when my father had passed, my mother and I grieved totally different. And it was very difficult because I had to really take her lead on it because it was her husband. Even though it was my dad, it was her husband. And when she wanted to clear out his things I want to say it was within 3 months. I completely didn't want to do it. And we did it because that's what she needed to do to start her healing journey. But it was hard for me. And I know it was hard for my brothers and sisters as well. So that is just another example of I was having to let go of him in the personal property before I was thinking if that was gone, he's gone. So that's just an example of how we grieve so differently. She needed it to move forward. I had to respect that, even though it was not what I needed. So I had to navigate around that, and
yeah.
keep all my little trinkets of his, and pile them together. And so, yeah, so it is complicated.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. One of the things that you just talked about is feeling like you're losing that person again when you let their things go. And that's different for for everyone. There are some people that really feel that hold on to things forever. And there are other people that know that no matter what they have, it doesn't replace that bond that they had with the person. And so it's much easier for them to let things go. And then there's, everyone in between. And none of those things are right or wrong. And absolutely, it makes it challenging when people in the same family have different processes. And in that case, certainly if I was working with someone who was going through something like that, I would suggest maybe asking for, if there's something that someone was willing to let go, asking for that thing until they were also either ready to let it go or put it in a place that that thing is being honored in the way their person would be honored.
Yeah, yeah. When we were clearing out the house, my parents had a huge house, and when my mom sold, my dad's bedroom set, like nobody really wanted it. And I couldn't let it go. And it's in my bedroom today, and it's totally not my style, but I feel guilt if I give it away because it was his. So I'm looking for a better place for it, not in my bedroom, but so it's so true. Let
Right.
go of things in different ways.
Absolutely. I remember, so this year, actually, in 2 days, is the 20th anniversary of my father's passing. And I remember when he passed, he has a twin brother, and we were going through his clothes. And his brother said, let's just bag all these up and take them to Goodwill. And I was like, no. He's like, well, what are you going to do with all of his clothes? And I said, I don't know, but we cannot take those to Goodwill. And I had no idea why I thought I needed all of his clothes, but I mean, giant trash bags full of clothes. And it was later, a little later, when my mind was clear, that I was able to go, oh my gosh, I want to have his clothes made into quilts. And in fact, I had a quilt made for myself and two of my sisters of my dad's clothes. And that's what we ended up doing with them. And I use that quilt all the time because I want to have him wrapped around me. And I don't want to have this wonderful quilt made and then put it in a closet because that wouldn't honor him. And so it's just about what you need to do in that moment. And it may not always make sense, and that's okay. I also had a throw made, a small quilt made out of my mother's clothes. And I had hearts that started at the bottom of it and went all the way to the top, representing like the love and it's going to heaven. So that's where that came from.
And you also had individual hearts to
I
hang on
did.
to, right?
Yes, I had individual hearts made out of one of her shirts. That was a plaid shirt that worked really well for Christmas ornaments. And then my mom just passed away on September 11th of 2023. And so for Christmas this past year, I gave those hearts to people in our family. She had, let's see, she was one of 7. There were 5 girls, so she had 4 sisters. And so I gave the hearts to her sisters, and then to my sister and my niece.
I think that is so special. I know it's such a raw topic to discuss. How have you been navigating? Because I just was thinking of how I was navigating my dad, and even though it's been 6.5 years, it's lessened, but it's still there. And yours is still so raw. Are you doing something to tend to your heart?
I know that I don't have to have a timetable on what it's going to look like. I'm really clear on that for myself. One thing that I have done that's been incredibly helpful is I found an author. Her name is Megan Devine, and she wrote a book, It's Okay to Not Be Okay, and it's dealing with grief. And she also has a 30-day writing course where every day you are emailed a prompt to help you write about things that you may have never thought about writing, to help process your grief. And it's been really interesting and very healing. And some of the things were about, choosing a specific memory, things that might be predictable, how you're feeling, what you wish other people would say or do for you, those things that are more predictable. But some things that I was not expecting are write about a color. What's the color? When you think of your person, what's the color? What's the color? And I remember I knew exactly what the color was going to be. Yellow. My mom loved yellow roses. I was like, oh, it's yellow. And then as I'm really sitting there thinking about it, I had this memory of a trip that we took to Monterey. I think it was Monterey, California. And she had this giant big floppy hat on. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's the color. And it wasn't yellow, it was the color of the hat. So it was really interesting how this course and these prompts help you move through things that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and help you just kind of work through that, some of those emotional things that that sometimes you don't feel like you have anyone to talk to about them.
I love how you said you have no expectations on that healing piece, because I feel that same way. It's never going to be, you're never going to be healed. You're just going to move on. And at the end, before, I found a quote that is, I think, perfect for this topic, that I'll read towards the end of our conversation here today. But I do love that you're wearing yellow today.
Thank you. It's a coincidence that I'm wearing yellow because I didn't know I was going to talk about that story. But
Maybe, and
yeah,
perhaps not.
it's a bright color. And I thought one of the things that we often do is wear dark, a lot of dark colors in our grief. And I think that there's some expectation around how we're supposed to show up in the world and how we're supposed to seem sad, and wearing bright colors is something that's often taboo. And I thought it doesn't have to be, because there's a dialectic in grief, in that we can be so sad and still be happy about other things, or happy about memories that we have about that person or that thing or relationship, whatever it is we're grieving. There's a dialectic that's often not recognized in our society. And I don't need to wear black because we're talking about grief.
And they both can be true. Grief and happiness can both be true at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
Do you sense, okay, we're going a little woo here. Do
Okay.
you sense your parents around you a lot?
Well, that's interesting. I sense my dad. Very clear messages, very clear signs, I'll say, moments when I know he's there, he's watching out for me. My mom, that this is so new, and I think because I'm still grieving, it's really hard for me to recognize her. Although I've been told from someone that I spoke to that she's around me very strongly all the time, and that one of the ways that she communicates will be with hummingbirds, which has been really an interesting journey, because I was like, oh my gosh, months after she passed, this person told me that. And days after she passed, I have a glass door that I often leave open my front, it's a storm door, right, for my front door. And there was a hummingbird outside of it days after she passed, just hovering there at the front door. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I certainly look now for hummingbirds, but I know that's not the only time she's around. And I feel like I'll more and more be able to sense her as I work through my grief.
And one thing I want to say to our audience is that we can ask to see signs.
Yes.
We can ask to see specific signs. I will give you an example. I had not felt my dad for a while. And it's probably because I was in my head, not looking for him, not paying attention. And I was celebrating my birthday, and I was going out of town. And I'm driving on the road, and I said, all right, Dad, I said, I have not seen you lately. I have not felt you. Okay, this is what I want. I need to know that you're there. So I said, and he loves birds. He just loved the colorful birds. I'm like, all right, I want a cardinal. I want a yellow finch. I want a bluebird. Or I want a John Deere tractor, because he was a farmer and John Deere tractors. I swear there was not 5 minutes that went by, and there was this huge John Deere tractor that appeared in front of me. And I was like, okay, that was cool. And then when I turned the corner, within a couple minutes, a red cardinal flew in front of me. So it's like we have to be on the lookout for those messages. And I was so tickled by both of those because I'm like, I knew he was around.
Absolutely. And I know that not everyone necessarily thinks that they can receive those messages, but you're absolutely right. I think of them as messages as I'm here, I'm watching, I care. You know, someone may say they're signs, they're just signs that they're near and that they're, still watching over us. And I think it's to each their own how that comes up for them. But for me, it's very comforting to know they're there, even when they have to really get my attention because I don't recognize it.
I love that too. So, and also, let's talk a little bit also about grief in our pets because you also recently lost a pet.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is, they're like family members to people.
They are. I know this may be a controversial statement, but I often feel like animals are the truest example of unconditional love that we have on the planet. And it's so hard to lose them. And sometimes people grieve much harder at the loss of their pet because of that type of relationship than they do maybe with a person, which people look down on, but they love us so unconditionally. And it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful relationship that we have with our animals. And it was very hard to let her go.
I have to tell you, it's because I've had experienced severe loss from pets before that I haven't owned a pet in years because of that loss. And I know that the love is probably greater, but the thought of that loss has just stopped me.
Yeah.
So interesting because I love animals, but my kids both have them. So I get to
Yeah.
see them and then go home.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's incredibly painful. And I think though that it's like with anything else, we take the risk when we love something or someone, we take the risk of losing. And that doesn't mean necessarily we don't take, we choose not to take the risk because we know it's going to be painful, but the pain is worth it, and that's absolutely the way I think about animals. It's worth it. They bring so much to our lives, or to mine anyway.
Mhm. Yes, I think a lot of
Yeah.
people agree with that.
Yeah.
That's
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up because there are so many different kinds of loss. Obviously, I have my parents, just lost my dog, and just even more recently, my mom's sister passed. It's a lot, but people or animals passing aren't the only loss that we feel. And it could be a loss of a relationship, it could be a deterioration of a relationship. And so we're grieving what it once was. It's different now, it's in a different form. It could be a job, it could be a missed opportunity. There are so many things that we grieve, or that we should grieve maybe. And
Mhm.
we're very much this like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on type of culture. And that's not actually always in our best interest. And some of these events that are happening in our lives, we need to take the space to process our grief and loss. But we don't often, and it's not usually encouraged. It's much more like, um, it's much easier for other people because they don't know how to show up, and we don't handle difficult emotions well. So it's much easier for other people for us to move forward or see the good in this. And I remember the first time my mom said, well, or the first time someone said about my mom passing, well, she's in a better place. And I was like, that's really not helpful, but thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Um, at, and someone says something like that because they want you to be more comfortable. They want you to move past it because you're making them uncomfortable, or they think that that's going to help you not feel pain. It's not true. You're going to feel the pain and the loss of the person passing, regardless of your idea of where they go next and what's happening next. You still have lost them here. and now. And so I think that people really do try to move us past our grief long before we're ready. And I think that's a lot about just this, that's our society, that kind of like, you need to move forward. I think it's because we're uncomfortable with it and don't know how to deal with it. And frankly, I also think it has something to do with being in a, capitalistic society that's very focused on productivity. And when we're struggling or grieving and we need some downtime, many people don't see that as being productive, but it actually could be the most productive thing you do, is to manage and work through that grief.
Yeah, there is a lot of personal growth in that stillness, right? Of just being still and being and not doing.
Absolutely.
I personally have been going through a loss of not of a death, but a loss of a a person that was in my life for a very long time, and I am dealing with some days I feel like I am really going through the death of a person, but it's really just a loss, but it's still, it threw me for a loop. And yeah, I don't know how to process this. I mean, I'm just working through it, but it's very difficult. So like you had said earlier, it's not just about in a death, a physical death, but it's also in emotional. So yeah, I've been navigating that in my own personal life.
Yeah.
So
And it's difficult. And I would say that for some people, that might be a more difficult situation than a death, because that's person is still, down the street or in the next town or whatever that looks like, and unavailable to us. And sometimes we don't know why, or sometimes we had to make that really difficult decision to move past that relationship. But the fact that they're still there and they were so important and they're no longer available is really hard. And
yeah,
it's a different kind of hard than someone not being available because they passed away.
right, right. And it's in society's eyes, it would be less than. And of course, maybe that is true because they're still existing, but it's still hard to navigate through that type of loss and grief.
Right. And I think that's a great example of how we as a society create a hierarchy of what we should be grieving and what we shouldn't be grieving. And we dismiss a lot of people's grief because of that. And I think you see it very clearly in the workforce when someone passes away. If it's a parent or a grandparent or a sibling, you get 5 days off work and then you need to be back and ready to go back to work. But if it's an uncle or a cousin, they're not quite as important. So you only get 2 or 3 days. And there's a hierarchy there.
Or if it's a friend, you get no days.
No days. You get to take your vacation time. And I think, same as with a pet, same, right? It's just an animal. And so there's this hierarchy that's been created that often causes people to not work on their grief and to not sit with those emotions and to do the work to move through it or move on with it, right? Because of that hierarchy and judgment.
And there's also the grief to talk about, which is like your life that's been on your unlived areas of your life that you were expecting too, that people are also grieving that no one thinks about. The
Absolutely.
unlived lives that you didn't get. So
Absolutely.
grief is just so broad and so different for everybody's journey. And like you said, society expects like a one view.
And even in our DSM, which is the diagnostic manual that we diagnose mental health disorders, grief is given 3 months and then it becomes, something that's pathologized. And it's not like that in other cultures, right? There are some other cultures that there's an expectation that someone would be grieving for a year. And the way that communities and society show up for people in grief is so very different than it is here. And I learned a lot about that in a course I took in college, how other cultures show up in grief. And it really opened my eyes to how kind of poorly we do it sometimes here
Mhm.
in our country.
Yeah, yes. Speaking of grief, of course, I'm having to attend a funeral this weekend, and it is of a son, an adult son that that the parents were gone when it happened. And it's just a situation where you think the parents would go first before the son, and that's a whole nother facet to the piece of grief, right? Your son dies before, the out of order, which it normally does. And so I am not looking forward to going to that, but I want to pay my respects and my love to this family that I've known all my life.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so sorry for them, and I think um there's nothing that's going to make that easier for them losing their child, and knowing that people care about them is what they need.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah. So this grief thing, man,
Right?
not for
It,
sissies.
it's definitely not for sissies. And if we do the work that we need to do, we incorporate our memories in a way that allows us to experience the person or the thing that we lost differently versus completely shutting it down. And, going back to one of the things we talked about at the beginning of our conversation was, the fact that happiness and grief can exist at the same time. There is lots of research to show that when we're pushing our emotions down, our difficult emotions, it also suppresses emotions that we actually want to feel. So if we're trying to not feel our grief, we're also not going to feel happiness to the same degree that we might. And doing this work allows us to have all of those emotions fully in regard to the situation or the person that we lost. But in general, in our lives, it's really important to show up for yourself in this way so that you can have a life that's very full versus trying to push parts of it away, which unfortunately, it's just a byproduct that you're going to push other parts away too.
Yeah. Is there anything in your personal life or professional that helps either your clients or helps you to work through some of those?
I think journaling really is helpful. And that can look different depending on who the person is or what they lost. But really writing about it in a safe place where they can say anything they want to on that piece of paper, um, that can be really helpful. Having someone to talk to and process their their feelings, emotion, experiences with is important. And it, doesn't have to be someone, it doesn't have to be a counselor, like me, but someone, right? And maybe it does need to be a counselor if you're really struggling. And I think it's important to recognize that too. But I think to recognize that it comes and goes in waves. And sometimes you'll feel like you're doing okay, and then it just washes over you. I remember one year, I don't even remember when it was now, but my father had been gone for a while. And I was just getting really sad and I didn't know why. And I was grouchy. And then I realized, oh, his birthday is this week, right? Um, and what am I going to do about that? Because it just came up. Like he'd had plenty of birthdays that had passed since then that I didn't have this experience, but I was able to really reflect on it and recognize, oh, his birthday. And so I decided to throw a birthday party for him. And I invited my sisters and one of my sisters, my half sister, her mom, and her children, and we had a little birthday party, in his honor. And that was a way that I was able to do that. But it was a little surprising because there had been many years past where I didn't have that sadness that's just sometimes it just washes over us. And I think it's really important to recognize it's like a wave. It comes in and goes out. And sometimes it's like a sneaker wave and it comes in and knocks you down. And all of it's okay. And there's just not a wrong way. There's not a wrong way to do it except to not do it.
You reminded me of a story a few years ago. I was having dinner with one of my girlfriends, and all of a sudden she got like white, and she couldn't even get it out. And I was like, "What is the matter?" And she realized that it was the day of her dad's passing, and she had forgotten, and she was so upset with herself for forgetting. And I was like, "But your dad would be happy to know that you're not thinking about it all the time." So we have to allow ourselves grace that if we don't remember, we still love them, we still hold their heart. And it was really a poignant moment for her, and she felt so bad when she really should have just been allowing herself some grace, that she was moving past that every day, thinking about it. So we also put guilt upon ourselves when we do forget things like that, but we shouldn't. We should allow ourselves the grace, because it doesn't lessen our love any more.
Absolutely, it doesn't. And I think, I mean, that's beautiful that we need to allow ourselves grace, and we need to allow other people grace too in
Yes.
managing their grief. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, my friend, we are going to put into the show notes where people can get a hold of you. And is there anything you want to say before we end our little conversation about death, sorrow, grief, moving
Uh,
through it?
well, I do want to say I heard someone say this a while back on a podcast, and I cannot remember who said it. So unfortunately, I can't give credit to the person who said this, but they said, you don't have to worry about trying to make things right for someone who's grieving. You just need to worry about just trying to make today a little bit better for them. And I think that's a really great way to approach it when you don't know what to do for someone. How might I make today just a little bit better for them than yesterday or the day before?
I like that thought. I like that thought a lot. Um, I did find this quote, and I do want to read it for us today. The reality is, you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss that you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. And that was from Elizabeth Gruber Ross and John Kessler. And I thought that was very appropriate for our conversations today.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I appreciate you so much for coming on and talking about such a difficult topic. We probably could go on about more, but I'd love to have you come back and talk about other things and the services that you provide, and maybe we'll do something fun. Stephanie and I have what do we call ourselves? We have a working,
Work
uh,
group.
yeah, our little work group. We get together and we do work on Zoom together, and get some things done. But it's been a pleasure having you on here, my friend, and I'm wishing you lots of healing in your journey with your mom and your pets, and of course your dad too. And I love you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I feel the same. I love you dearly, and I'm so grateful that our friendship is one of the few positive things the pandemic brought into my life. But absolutely it is, and I'm very grateful for that. And I would love to come back anytime. So just please let me know.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I
Take
appreciate
care.
you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Take good care.